Hey, welcome back to my hub. As you all know, we are doing Python on the job, a very career oriented to do kind of Python tutorial series. Today, we are going to talk about another aspect of the programming language in question. Today, we are talking about repeating execution of some part of our code, which is done through loops. So for absolute newbies, loops are nothing but those parts of the code wherein you say that a certain part of the code, a certain block of the code will be executed again and again and again till a certain condition either happens or stops happening. So in your programming analysis, whenever you come across a situation in your idea wherein you have to repeat something till something happens or stop happening, you're going to use loops. So just like any other programming language, Python has for and while loops. So there are no specific rules wherein you would say that a certain loop is only used in a certain situation. But in general, when there is a definite numeric understanding about how long the loop should run, such as looping through a list which has a definite amount of items or similar stuff, you would generally use the for loop. And when your repetitions are based on a certain event or a certain happening wherein certain thing has to happen or stop happening, in such situations you will generally use the while loop. But there are ways in which both can be used interchangeably, so there is no potential pitfall or as such like that. But this is the general what you can say programming practice which people practice. So let's get on with some practical stuff. So I'm going to open this is the place where I have all my code, and all right, so let's start with our first exercise of the day. So we have already talked about operators like plus, minus, you all know that. And then there is this multiplication operator called star. What would happen if I multiply a certain string, a certain character? What happens? Well, what really happens is that if you, let's say, multiply O by 2, there will be OO. If you multiply B by 3, it will be B. So what multiplication does is absolutely as we expect. If you multiply numbers, it would be actually doing what you want, multiplying the number, like 2 into 2 is 4. But with strings, it actually repeats that many numbers. So what we have done is we have written a for loop here. So range is a function which actually returns you a list through which you will loop. In C or Java or C++, you could have written something like for int I is equal to 0, I less than equal to 20, I plus plus, and then you would start the loop. But in this case, you don't have to do all that. You just say that I want a range between this, so it will start from the first character and then it will keep on going. So in the loop, what we have done, of course, we have indented the code here under for. As I told you that always you have to indent when you're writing block of statements, conditions, loops, functions, as we will see later on, classes, etc. So we say print, we want to print O multiplied by I. Now what is I? We have this I in range. So what it means, I'm saying define a variable called I and traverse it or take it through the entire range from 1 to 20. So it will be a range which we will be operating on. So let's try this out for ourselves. So I'll open the terminal. And all right, now I'll see this now, Python 3 space there you see it goes in a particular pattern, and as you can see that it is actually repeating the stuff, because every time the I gets incremented and then it's 2o, 3o, 4o, because every time the I is incremented, it will be implementing the multiplication which we did here. So as you can see, this is what it does. So just to give you an example of how a for loop ideally looks like in Python. Let's see something more now. We just saw that we used a range, but what if you want to loop through a list? Now sometimes you have a list of customers or a list of products and you want to tabulate them and print it on the screen. Of course, when I'll start something on web application development, you will actually see what I'm talking about. But to tell you in a real theoretical way, and also in fact practical way, that if you want to go through a list and read one item at a time, you have a list of names, you have a list of anything, the best way to do it is to use a for loop. So I have declared a list containing some names, just my name and a few random names of my friends. Now here also the best part is that you just have to declare a traversal variable. You say, for example, I have said name, for name in the name of the list, which is names. A lot of names coming in my sentences. So for name in names, so names is the list, and I'm telling Python to declare a variable called name and use it to travel through this list. Actually you call it traversing, but actually in the real sense you are traveling through that list, picking out one item at a time and printing it. As you will see, my name is plus name, which means every time the loop will iterate, it will travel through the list, take one element out of it and print it. So let's try it out. There you go. It printed out the entire list. So what we did here, we declared a list and we simply declared a for loop with a variable, a traversal variable, which actually goes through the list, picks out one element of the list at a time in every iteration and prints it. As simple as that. You don't need to write something like list of len -1 or something like that, which you generally keep doing in C, C++ or Java. Here, as I always kept saying, that Python is really clean like English. It's as simple as this. It can't get any simpler. Now let's try to mix the concepts which we have learned. What if you want to skip a certain element? Now what we have done here is a small exercise which you can also try out yourself. Guess what, guys, even a single string is also treated as list in Python. Here's an example of this. Here's a proof of that. So what we have done here is that we would traverse the list as we did in the previous example, but I have put a condition saying that if any of the names start with the letter A, I want to skip it. I don't want anything with the letter A. So how do you know that a certain string starts with the letter A? So you treat it also as a list. An individual string is also treated as a list. So when this for loop happens, I say, all right, when you go through this list of names, when you pick up individual element, which is individual name, see whether the first character, that is at position 0, see whether the character at position 0 of that string is A. If it is A, then we don't print it. And how we say we don't want to print it? We don't want to stop the list from executing all over. We don't want to stop the loop from executing. We just want to say, just don't do the work this time, just fast forward, just continue means for this one particular iteration or this one particular repetition, don't do anything, just move ahead and just skip this and do the next iteration. So every time it will find an A, it will not print that name because we said continue. What it means by continue is that you just go through the iteration without doing anything and start the next element. So we'll see how this works. So you saw something in this. So now you will have to see this very carefully. You have an if condition inside for, so there is a double indentation here. So the whole unit of that block of the for loop actually comes inside this statement, but then there is also an if statement which goes in, and you say that continue, which means I don't want to repeat that particular thing. That's it. So you might ask, it's all right, we wanted to continue our execution of the loop. What if you want to have a certain condition where you want to just break out? We don't want to do any further iterations. That time the keyword is break. So let's try this. What happens with the break? We'll see. So you will see what happens. So it just printed three things. Why? So I told him to break when he found this. So you can figure out for yourself what happens. But the important point is that there is a double nesting here, which you are seeing for the first time, and I want to bring your attention to that. So you will be having multiple nestings like this, but now you can imagine when there were only braces in old languages, how confusing it used to be. But here, one look at the code and you will be able to say which block is where and how it ends. So that's the beauty of the language, friends. So I told you that apart from for loop, there is also a while loop. While loop is executed or used when a certain event is happening or has to stop from happening. So just a simple example for you to do a countdown. Now it's a simple thing, but I thought we would give you the point that it's not just that for is strictly used for numeric stuff and while is strictly used for non-numeric stuff. I deliberately used a numeric example here, but at the same time you will see that it's not something which is automated. You have to make some event happen. So here what we have done is we have decremented, and then you do a countdown, and as soon as the C becomes 0, the while loop will terminate. We'll see this in action actually. So as you can see this, it was actually decrementing the variable. In this case, if you see, for that matter, we started the C as 10. So until C is greater than equal to 0, now we are actually going to change the value of C. So you print, and then C minus equal to 1, which means C equal to C minus 1. So you are decrementing it by 1, and while you do this at one point it will be 0, and after that it will go below 0. So you don't want anything to happen after that. So you see the difference. When you were looping through the list, you did not do anything to the list itself. You only traveled through it. Here you are making something happen to the variable in question, that is C. So what you're doing here is you are actually artificially triggering an event, and that event is that you are decrementing C, and that event will only continue till the C becomes 0. After that it stops. So this is how the while loop works. So while loop is generally used when certain events have to be triggered or some things have to happen. But as I said in the very beginning, there is no general or fixed rule where you will use for or while loop. But in most cases, while would be convenient when you want a certain thing to happen. For example, if you're really very curious, when you boot your operating system, any operating system, do you know what happens? There is an infinite while loop running in the background, and that is called a message pump. And a message pump, actually what it does is, whenever a certain event happens in your operating system, in your desktop, a certain file, you delete something, you type something, the message is picked up and sent to the appropriate unit of code through the memory management and all the process scheduling. It is actually called the message pump. So in such a situation, while is put, and the while will only execute when the kill signal is given. So just to give you an example of where the while loop is applied. So this is all about for loops and while loops. It is all about executing repetitive code. So I would urge you all to download the tar file given in the description if you have not done so already, and try these assignments yourself. And please do subscribe, because a lot of exciting stuff is going to come your way. So until the next tutorial, this is Krishnakant signing out from the hub. Goodbye and happy coding.